Welcome back to From Corporate to Cash Flow. We are Andrea Cannon and Liz Schwab, two pharmacists navigating the process of building time and financial freedom through real estate lending and investing while working our day jobs. Today, we're going to have a completely different style of podcast, and I'm super excited about it. So, thanks, Liz, for joining me today.
Yes, of course.
So, today we're really going to talk about how to get started in real estate investing and lending and all different kinds of things. But the main reason we wanted to have this style of podcast is because there are so many different ways to invest in real estate and always becomes just like a shiny object syndrome. And you hear about one thing, wholesaling, for example, and you get started down the path of wholesaling and you're like, okay, this is going well or it's not going well. But then, like 30 days later, or maybe even a week later, you start hearing about bird dogging. And then a few days after that, you hear about private money lending, and then you hear about EMD lending, and then you hear about transactional lending, and then you hear about RV parks, and then you hear about mobile home parks. And meanwhile, you're starting and stopping and starting and stopping 10 different things, and you're getting overwhelmed in the process. You're spending tons and tons of hours on Zooms or recordings, trying to learn on YouTube, all kinds of things, how to get started, what you should do. And everybody's telling you something different. So, the best way to figure out what to do is to figure out what you have and where you want to go from there. And so we're going to really walk you through that today.
Yes. All right. Very excited. Like you said, Andrew, I think this is super important and hopefully will be very helpful to people that are just trying to figure out where maybe they fit in the puzzle right now. So first, I would like to maybe orient everyone to the image that we have here. So we'll see time on the left-hand side and money on the right-hand side. So what we want to do is basically break this down at a high level to see maybe what you have and what your goals are and see where maybe you are most aligned to do your um, initial experience in real estate. So let's start at a really high level. At the top, it says new to real estate, start with what you have right now. So before we do that, I think there are two important distinctions just in general, right? So we have our W-2 workers. So us, Andrea, myself, we have our regular jobs. We have a typical 9 to 5, right? And then we have our real estate professional status. So this is a different type of status that has some tax advantages that a regular W-2 worker does not necessarily have. And these are two very different distinctions that have very different and important implications tax wise. So, Andrea, can you maybe just go over that at a very high level so that people can understand maybe what category they fall into?
Yeah. So a lot of people want to get into real estate because they hear about cash flow, appreciation, depreciation, things like that. But not everyone can take advantage of all of those things. And that's why this is a really important distinction. So, real estate professional status is distinguished by someone who does 750 hours of time on real estate or more per year. The other key distinction, though, is you also must do more than anything else. So, for example, if you work a full time W 2 job, you would have to work, and let's say that that is 40 hours a week. I know that some of us work 50 plus hours a week, but let's just say it's 40 hours a week. You would have to work 41 hours a week on real estate. So it's obviously very, very hard to do as a full time W 2 employee. Now, if you're part time, or you work PRN at a hospital picking up shifts, it'd be a lot easier to obtain real estate professional status. But the best way that people can do it is if they are married, one spouse has a W 2 job and the other spouse has real estate professional status. And so that's kind of the way that a lot of people are able to navigate that. Obviously, if you're single, then that isn't something you can do. You either have to be a real estate professional or not. And so, once again, that's 750 hours on real estate. So, you can't just get your real estate license and become a real estate professional. Like, that's not how it works. You have to spend a significant amount of time on real estate. Now, once you become that real estate professional, then you're able to take advantage of a lot of the other things that come, tax benefits that come with real estate investing. So, as an example, depreciation. So, depreciation, we've talked about this in other episodes, but depreciation is basically a paper loss that the IRS gives you. And it's not actually that you're losing money. So, I just want to clarify there because sometimes it sounds really bad, but IRS gives you a formula. We're not going to go over that formula right now, but you're able to take those paper losses that aren't actually real losses and offset your income if you're a real estate professional. But you can't do that if you are a W 2 worker.
Yes. And then, to my understanding, those losses carry over each year until you have something else that is passive. If you are a W-2 worker, is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. So, if you make $1,000 a year as a, W-2 employee that from your real estate though, so $1,000 a year from your real estate investments, then, you could write that off passively from your depreciation. But the depreciation that you get is normally like, I'm going to use just ratios wise. Let's say you make $1,000 a year from your real estate investments, you would normally be able to depreciate, let's say 50,000 a year. So there's just no way to really catch up. There's always going to be more depreciation than is going to be available to you to offset. And yes, eventually, maybe if you become a real estate professional, then you'll have a lot of depreciation built up and you can start taking it. But that's probably way down the line for many of us.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for clarifying. And the depreciation aspect and the two different things we just talked about are important because some of these concepts apply to the different things that are listed under time and money. Meaning a real estate professional status can take advantage of the depreciation in some of these strategies, whereas a W-2 worker is not able to take the greatest advantage from depreciation. So it may not make sense to focus on depreciation as your main point of getting into real estate. So let's dive a little bit more into this time versus money. So break this down a little bit for us. It sounds pretty self-explanatory, but I'm assuming this means if you have more time available, then you look at the left-hand corner. If you have money available that you are willing to deploy into real estate, then you're going to be focusing on the money column, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So, some people are barely making ends meet with their current job, and so totally understand that that is could potentially be your scenario here. And so you will have to hopefully find some time, and obviously the time doesn't have to be like during your job, but maybe the couple hours after your job, the couple hours before your job, even if you have a commute during that time, those would be the times that you would try to take advantage of the things on the left. And contrast that with money. So if you are very busy, high income W 2 earner, odds are you have more money available than you do have time available. So you really don't have extra time to go driving around neighborhoods to see if there are rundown houses because you're working long hours, but you may have money to do some of the things on the right hand side. And so that's kind of how you would decide how to get started from here.
Yeah, I think this is great because you learn very quickly if you try to start in one category and you're like, I don't have enough time for this, right? I need something else. And so I think this is a really good way to distinguish the two different pathways at a high level here. So let's dive into the time column. So the first one is driving for dollars. And you put, if working local market. Can you expand on this?
Yeah. So, really quickly, whatever you decide on here, try to stick with it for the first 90 ish days to see if it's a good fit. Because, like I talked about earlier, if you find out new different opportunities every week, every other week, and then you keep switching around, you're never, no matter if any of these are a good fit for you or not, you're never going to move forward in real estate because you'll keep learning about new things. You'll be overwhelmed. All you're going to be doing is sitting on YouTube or reading books. You're not going to be taking any actionable steps forward. So we really want to focus, whatever you end up picking based off of this, let's stick with that for the first 90 days. That's really, really key. So talking about driving for dollars, and that's if you're working your local market. So let's say, for example, that you are living in Alaska. If you're living in Alaska and you're trying to do deals in Florida, this is not a good opportunity for you. However, if you're living in Florida and you're trying to do deals in Florida, this is potentially a good opportunity for you if you have time. So, what you're going to do is you're going to drive around neighborhoods and check and look at houses that maybe have overgrown lawns. Maybe a window is boarded up. Maybe there's just signs of deferred maintenance. Like it looks like the trash cans haven't been taken out in a while. Like you kind of know those houses that just give you like, something's off here sort of signs that house might be vacant or just fallen into disrepair, things like that. That's driving for dollars. The odds, what you really are hoping to do is find a buyer that's looking for houses to fix and flip in that local market. So once again, if you're in Florida, you're driving around in Florida, you're going to want to find a buyer in Florida that does fix and flips and find out if these are going to be a good fit for them. What you'll want to do then is find the owner of the property and reach out to the owner of that property. So it may be, even though you're in Florida and you're driving around in Florida, that owner could actually live in North Carolina. So you may end up having to call them from North Carolina, write them a letter in North Carolina, things like that, in order to find the owner of the property. And then you're going to make an offer on that property and then sell that to the end buyer that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and one thing that I do want to point out that's probably fairly obvious, but came to be very relevant for me very quickly is that you need to take into account your personality, right? And how this fits into the different things listed here. One of my first experiences was driving with someone who was door knocking, and I didn't want to get out of the car to go to the door. So just keep that in mind. Like, is it realistic? Does it fit in with your lifestyle and like your personality, essentially? Okay, let's move on to the second one: bird dogging or wholesaling.
Yeah. And so bird dogging is kind of a couple of different term, like it's an umbrella term, and people use it to refer to a couple different things. So think of it as either someone who is finding leads. So it could be like that last example, you either door knocked on that house that looked in disrepair, or you just got the address and you pass it along to someone else who actually does the next step for you. So that's one example of bird dogging. Another example of bird dogging is if you find deals that are posted on in the marketplace somewhere, right? So they're on Investor Lift, they're on Facebook, they're being advertised in your local RIA, things like that. Then you bring them to a buyer that probably is overwhelmed with a lot of different leads and unable to comb through those things, and they will pay you a small fee for bringing that already locked up deal. So those are two different ways to bird dog, but you really want to find an end buyer that you can work with directly and use that person and their buy box and connect with them like appropriate deals. You don't want to say, like, let's say it's a person who buys in Utah. You do not want to send them things in Nevada. That's not going to work for them, right? They have a buy box that's in Utah. Maybe it's specific for Salt Lake County. It's ARV after repair value of 600,000 or less. It needs to be at least 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. You don't want to send them $1 million home in like Utah County, right? So there's
Right.
just different things in there that you want to, dive into specifically. But for bird dogging, you definitely want to have a buyer lined up and that you have networked with and fully understand their buy box so that you can find deals specifically for them.
And can you expand on the time intensive part of this?
Yeah. So before I get into that, let me talk about wholesaling really quickly. So that's a little bit different. Wholesaling is where you take the property all the way through the contract phase. So let's say you find a lead, you either did door knocking, you're calling somebody, however you got that property in the first place, you negotiated with the seller or the agent that's representing that property. You get that property under contract, and then you sell that contract to an end buyer. So you don't actually ever own the property. You're basically getting paid to do the negotiation portion. Now, all those things, both bird dogging, driving for dollars, and wholesaling, they're all pretty time intensive because you have to do all of the negotiation. And that's the whole reason why you're getting paid, right? That's what you're getting paid for, is your negotiating skills and your ability to find a good deal. But obviously that takes time. It takes a lot of a lot of hours, a lot of phone calls, a lot of driving, a lot of door knocking, whatever kind of route you're doing, it's going to take a lot of that. And so just keep in mind that this isn't something where you just like knock on the first door, you talk to a seller, you write up a purchase contract, they sign it, you turn around to the next person you see and they buy it off you for 100,000 more than you locked it up at. That's not the scenario that's going to happen. You normally find that you have to talk to around 100 sellers before you're going to get a good deal. So keep that in mind. If you're not actually talking to a lot of people, that could take you a year, right? If you talk to one person a week, the odds of you locking up a deal before the end of the year aren't that high. But one person a week for 2 years, you'll probably have locked up a deal. So you could get lucky. It could be the very first person you talk to, but then you won't lock up another one for until year 3, right? So kind of
Yeah.
keep that in mind, but it does take a lot of time and a lot of effort. And that's where the value is in the marketplace. That's why there's buyers for these deals, right? Because they know that it takes all that time and they don't have that time. They're looking to fix and flip properties. They're not looking to negotiate with sellers or agents.
Right, right. And another thing as you were talking that I remembered is obviously it makes a difference if you're a one-man show, one-woman show, versus being on a team, right? You can probably move a lot faster if you're on a team, but then you also have to split those profits too. And then sometimes you need to put money or resources into finding these leads, depending on how deep you want to go into it. You could certainly all do it without putting any money into it, but a lot of people have additional resources as well. So those are just added factors to consider for that too.
Absolutely. And if you're just getting started and you don't know anything about real estate, would highly recommend joining a team just because they probably are putting resources into it. They can give you a list of people to call or door knock. They have the understanding of how to put together a purchase contract, right? Like, let's imagine you door knock on somebody's door. It's the 50th door you've knocked, and they finally say yes. They are ready to sell their house. Well, how much do you think you should lock it up at, right? How much, what's the right purchase price? Could
Yeah.
you buy it for $1 million? Could you buy it for $50,000? Like, of course, the seller is going to want the highest price and you naturally want the lowest price, but what's the price that's going to actually work for the end buyer, right? And how do you calculate that? Well, if you're on a team, people can help you with that. And they can also help you write up the purchase contract. Because I remember the very first time I needed to write up a purchase and sales contract, it took me 4 hours to
Yeah.
do. And I'd consider myself to be relatively smart, but like I'd never done it before. And anytime you do something for the first time, it's like, okay, well, what goes here? And do these actually have to add up to the full thing? Because that doesn't
Mhm.
exactly make sense. And like, do I have to check this box? Like, I don't really understand this. Right. And now it takes less than 10 minutes to do because I know what I'm doing. So being on a team is super, super helpful. But I can understand maybe why, if you're a little scared or something, you might not want to, but it definitely will help you get started a lot faster.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. And then moving on to the next one, we have lead generation, which is, I'm sorry, I skipped one. We are going to working for someone, so more immediate income. So go ahead and share your thoughts on that for us.
Yeah, so sometimes people want to talk to people and pick their brain and all kinds of stuff like that. Real estate investors get hit up all the time for, um, you know, those pick your brain type of conversations. And it's really frustrating sometimes because, we want to be helpful. We want to provide value to people who are getting started because I wanted the same thing when I was getting started,
Mhm.
right? But 9 times out of 10, people that reach out don't end up taking any action. So it's super frustrating that investors spend their time with people that aren't actually going to do anything with this
Yeah.
information. So one of the ways to, kind of combat that is to offer to work for somebody. And usually this happens where you work for somebody for free. It doesn't have to be very, very long that you're working for them for free, but the whole point is you're bringing them value by doing some tasks, and then they can provide value to you by showing you part of the process, bringing you along on deals, things like that. Now, you may get lucky and you could become like an assistant or something, and that does actually pay money. But either way, it's nice to just join somebody's team, do some tasks, and then be able to be a little bit more reciprocal in your, transactional offering, right?
Right, right. I like this option a lot. It seems, I don't want to say the safest, but you get experience, right?
Mhm.
And you can see the real world, maybe without floundering as much as if you just did it by yourself. So I like this one.
Yeah.
Okay, next is lead generation. Also time intensive. So please give us your thoughts.
Yeah, so this is a lot like the driving for dollars, bird dogging, wholesaling, but lead generation is just another way of finding different leads for future deals. So this can be done in a variety of different ways. Maybe if you, for example, don't have a ton of money but have a little bit of money, you could buy certain softwares that help pull lists or things like that to provide to other people for calling. Same thing. There's quite a few different softwares out there that can send automatic letters of intent, that can pull lists for people, things like that, that aren't that expensive. So maybe like you've got like a tiny bit of money, but wouldn't say you've got, hundreds of thousands to spare.
Mhm.
But like maybe you have a couple $100 a month that you could use for that. So that's a way to do it, is to basically buy leads or use your software for lead generation.
Perfect. And then our final one listed on the time column is property management, with the side note of having an operator mindset.
Yeah,
So, yeah, go ahead and expand on that too, please.
I realize I absolutely hate property management. does require a ton of time. And so, if you know that you have time and you would like money and you are really good at keeping things straight and organized and you're responsive and have a lot of hospitality traits, you may make a very good property manager. And that would be a really good opportunity to get started. You can do things like Airbnb property management. You could do long term property management. The only key is some of those you actually have to have your realtor license for. So just be aware, depending on the state, that may be the case. It's not everywhere, but just keep that in mind. You can also help someone. Like we have a co living and it requires more property management than just a regular long term rental, but less than an Airbnb. But we have someone that helps us with showing the property if no one is available to show it. So something like that, she gets paid for those showings, right? Because they're really important to us that we're able to respond to tenants in a timely fashion. So you can find someone that's looking for some help with their properties and help to do some of the management.
Okay, thank you. So let's maybe summarize all the different time options here, just as for the time category as a whole. So obviously you need time. It can be a little bit of time, it can be a lot of time. Obviously, your outcomes are going to vary based on the amount of time that you have to invest, right? You need to decide if you want to work by yourself, if you want to work on a team, if you want to manage tenants, if you maybe like computers or systems and finding those leads and how you're finding them, if you feel comfortable driving around and knocking on doors and engaging, individuals living in certain properties, right? So it's just a matter of what you feel most comfortable with, what fits into your day-to-day life, as we mentioned before. So these are all great options and very great starting points. But to Andrea's point, it's important to stick with it for a bit to really make sure that it's just like not the frustration that you're like, whatever, this is new, I don't like this, let's do something else, right? Because there are so many different things that you can go to, but if you want to try to really master something, that's when you're going to decide, maybe this is or isn't for me. So anything else you want to add to that before we go on to the money column?
Yeah, I know you just said it, but I really want to reiterate how important that is because it does take a significant amount of time to get good at something. So if you're trying something for a month or two, the odds of you being successful if you're making one call, one door knock, one thing a week are very, very low, no matter what is on this column. So just keep that in mind when you're deciding. Like I said, stick with something for 90 days. But if you're doing one thing a week, it maybe needs to be stick with it for a year. It's that serious.
Yeah.
So think about what might suit your personality the best if you have more time than money from this column, and then go with that as hard as you can for the next 90 days.
Yeah, I love it. All right, let's switch to if you have money. So obviously we talked about the distinctions between the W-2 workers and real estate professional status. It doesn't mean that only W-2 workers can do the money column. It just means that they probably have less time than maybe some other individuals. So keep that in mind as we go through these different options. So the first one is private money lending. And then we have below that no tax benefits, very passive. So, Andrea, can you explain what this private money lending looks like?
Yeah, so private money lending is when you have money that is not going through an institutional system. So it's not through a bank. And you can do it however you want, but would highly recommend having a significant amount of security through like a promissory note, deed of trust, things like that, all set up. And you're loaning money on property, real property. And you're getting paid a fixed return on this no matter how the property performs. So here's an example: you are loaning money to a business that does fix and flips. And so let's say you loan 100,000 on a property that's worth 300,000 at its current moment, and it will eventually hopefully be worth 500,000. So you're loaning 100,000, and then let's say that you're getting paid 12% per year, which is 1% per month. And that's the reason why I'm using that number, because it's easier. So that means you'll get paid $1,000 a month. So let's say that they fix and flip this property, they put $50,000 into it. They hold it for a little bit. So all in, they're around 200,000, and then they sell it for $1 million. Does that mean you get any more money? No, you're getting a fixed return no matter what, right? And then let's use the same example, right? You loan them 100,000, they put 50,000 into it, and then they put $50,000 of hold into it, and then they only are able to sell it for 210,000. So they only make a $10,000 difference right there. So, does that mean you get paid less? No. So, private money lending is really there's it has no tie to the outcome of how well the property does, anything like that. Now, of course, there's a caveat that if everybody continually loses money, then they're not going to be able to pay you. So just keep in mind that you're working with individuals who are experienced and have done this before and know what they're doing. You're properly secured, preferably in the first position, which is the very first lien secured on a property. That way, you have the most leverage and can take steps and action if you need to, if they don't perform the way that they're supposed to. But private money lending is is the most similar to your high yield savings account. Now, it's obviously not like that at all because your high yield savings account should exist and pay no matter what. And there is no underlying property to it. But it's a very similar concept. You lend out your money, you get paid either monthly or at the end. You don't have to do any ongoing work. You will hopefully get updates or follow up with people and then get paid back your principal at the end. Now, one important caveat is in some states you do have to be licensed to do this, but not all states. It's not even 50% of states. So just keep in mind you may want to look in your state specifically if you need to be licensed.
And then just pointing out a tidbit here, people may say, well, why would I do private money lending when I can just do a high yield savings account? Because the returns are significantly higher than your savings account with the high yield, right? So I know this was one of the strategies that I learned a long time ago. And I was like, well, I'll just park my money here. But then you look into your account and it's basically not making any money whatsoever, right? So that's why you would do it essentially. Any other comments? I mean, me personally, I know you put that it's very passive, and I mean, to your point, you would basically just wire money, right? And then you can either be as involved or uninvolved as the operator and yourself would like. Meaning, do you want more updates, less updates? Do you want to hear nothing and you just want your money, right? Are you getting paid on a monthly basis or at the end? So there are a few different ways to go about this too, but obviously you need to make sure with like anything else that you really trust the people that are involved in this transaction, right? And that it is properly secured. So just like Andrea talked about in the previous column, that you can work for someone, you can even group up with someone who has done these in the past, or maybe go in with a friend, so that you're not the only one going through the experience, basically. So I think this is a great option for anyone that's looking to get into real estate but doesn't have the time to really dive into everything that requires more time intensive operations.
Yeah, and that's a really good point because once again, just like anything, doing it for the first time without having any knowledge or anything, you can hear about a 50% return that you can get. And that sounds really, really nice. But that person is running a Ponzi scheme, something like that, right? So you want to make sure that you're working with people who've probably done it before. Maybe you're lending alongside someone who is an expert, things like that, in order to make sure that your money gets returned to you, right? Because a 50% return sounds really nice, but when you don't even get your principal back, let alone that 50% return, yeah, maybe you should have stuck with the 8 to 10%, right?
Yeah.
And so that's so key. So don't get caught up in unrealistic expectations and returns, because I think slow and steady wins the race always in almost everything, and private money lending is definitely no exception, and it's probably for sure the rule. Um, One thing I didn't really mention before when we were talking about it, though, is there aren't any tax benefits. So you are going to get taxed on this money, and there's no way to do like depreciation or anything like that because you're just a lender on the property
Mhm.
versus having any ownership. So keep that in mind. Like your returns are not, they're like the least safe on this column over here. But that being said, it's much better than your high yield savings account, like you highlighted. My savings account currently gives me 3.4% annually, which is obviously not 10%. So 3.4% is not nearly as good. Um,
Mhm.
One other thing too to highlight is that this money doesn't necessarily have to come from your checking account. You could also use your self-directed retirement account in order to private money lend. And so both Liz and I have done that ourselves. And so we have converted prior employers' 401ks into solo 401k. And from there, we are doing private money lending with that. So it doesn't have to be like your checkbook is the thing that has all this money, right? It doesn't have to be that you're sitting on wads and wads of cash in your bank account. It could just be that you have money that's sitting in a retirement account that you're able to use for this as well.
Yeah, and there's another podcast that goes deeper into this mechanism for rolling over your previous retirement accounts into self-directed accounts that you can reference for more information. All right, so let's go on to the next one, which is private money partner or PMP. So there may be some tax benefits and semi-passive. So
Yeah.
your thoughts on this?
So, private money partner is when you go in on a property and then you have an equity partnership. And so, this may sound really, really good, and it can be really, really good if the operators are doing good things. So, I'll give you an example. You may lend $100,000 on a property that's going to be used as a co living. And then you are given, let's say, 35% ownership of this property as part of that. So then you're able to take um, some appreciation, right? So, like, let's say eventually in 5 years, you guys go to sell the property and it's appreciated $100,000. So now you're going to get an extra 35,000 in addition to your original principal back. You also get the benefits of depreciation because you're an owner, and so those are those paper losses we've talked about previously. They're not actually real losses, but they're paper losses, and you're able to take that against some of those gains that you're making, hopefully from your cash flow that you're getting, and that has a split in it. So there's definite benefits to being a private money partner, but one of the downsides is that you are an equity owner, which is there's an upside, but there's also a downside. And equity owners are paid last. So here's an example of that. Let's say the property was purchased. Your money as the private money partner was $100,000, and that was a down payment on a $500,000 property. And then let's say that the housing market absolutely crashes out, and now the property is worth 250,000. Do you think your $100,000 is anywhere? No. So you are absolutely out of luck in this setting. So you want to make sure that the property is purchased correctly, and like for a good deal. And then you also want to make sure that the operators of the property have a good, solid plan. Because with private money lending, how it didn't really matter what was going on with the property, whether it made money, whether it didn't make money, you, in theory, should still get paid. In this scenario, your cash flow is going to come at, or the money that you're getting every month, and as an outcome is going to come as a percentage of the cash flow. So if they don't end up cash flowing like they expected, then your cash flow is going to be very, very low. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that the co-living or rent by the room strategy is what you lended for as a private money partner. And you are now on the LLC, you own this property, you're 35% owner of it. And they originally thought that this property was going to make $2,500 a month in cash flow after everything. But then let's say that you buy the property and immediately the roof needs to be repaired. And then the air conditioning goes out and you get a flood in the basement and all kinds of other things happen. And the cash flow just doesn't end up coming. Like, they don't fill the rooms like they thought they would. They have 11 bedrooms, but they've only ever filled 4. And then they have a really bad tenant who's not paying, and then their management's bad. So then the cash flow ends up being very, very low or non-existent. Well, you're getting no monthly payments then, even though you put $100,000 in. So there are truly benefits. I'm giving kind of the downsides of this. I don't want it to sound like this is a negative thing. You're an owner of a property and you're not really having to do too much on it, which is really, really nice, because I personally don't want to manage tenants anymore. I'm moving forward and away from that myself. And so a lot of people who have more money than time also shouldn't be managing tenants. It takes a lot of time, effort, and energy. So the nice part is here, you put the money in and that's your contribution. Someone else is going to be doing the management, and it doesn't have to be you, which can be really, really nice, especially if you have really good partners. So we have an example of this in a previous podcast episode with John Davis. He talks about doing short-term rentals, and they have private money partners come in, and then they have cool ways for you to take advantage of the depreciation, even if you're a W-2 investor. So it's a really awesome opportunity and a really good positive example of this working out. But also just wanted to explain some of the downsides.
Yeah, for sure. And granted, private money lending and private money partnership both have inherent risk, as do all real estate strategies. But what I'm hearing is that you ride the highs and then you ride the lows a little bit more with the private money partnership. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Alrighty. And then the next one is ownership. So, like single family homes or small multifamily. So, some tax benefits and more active. So, let's dive a little bit deeper into this.
So let's say that you private money lending is out because you want some of the benefits of owning the properties itself. And private money partners, you're like, I don't have like enough control over that. I'm giving somebody a, let's say, 100 grand, and then they're controlling the property, right? They have 65% ownership, and I'm just giving examples of amounts, but it could be split however. And they're managing the property, and that makes me nervous because what if they don't manage it well? What if they, don't do things the way I would want them to? So instead, you could actually just own the property yourself. So look for a deal, online, or negotiate the deal yourself, something like that. Buy the deal, own the property outright yourself. So I'd highly recommend getting a property manager if you're doing this, but you still will have to manage the property manager no matter what, and work with them on things. So they'll, do a walkthrough. They'll say that these things need to be replaced beforehand. They'll need to get your approval. They'll have to let you know if anything over a certain number of dollars happens, right? In order to get your approval to move forward with things. There's a lot of things that you still need to manage, even if you aren't the primary property manager. However,
Mhm.
it is nice because you get the full benefits, right? Instead of putting $100,000 down on a property that you only have 35% ownership of, you put $100,000 down on a property that you have full ownership of. Um,
Mhm.
Full control. And if it does well, it's on you. And if it doesn't do well, it's completely on you too. So that's a really nice
Yep.
way to kind of balance those things out. And if you have more time, ownership of single family homes or small multifamily can really have a lot of benefits. One of the things, though, to keep in mind, depending on where you are, you may or may not make a significant amount of cash flow. And so, when I was really investigating this as a strategy on Bigger Pockets, they said anywhere from $150 to $300 per month per door is a pretty good guess on how much money that you should be targeting. So, if you think about, let's say, for example, that you're a pharmacist and you would like to replace your income, and you have one property, and let's say it does really, really well, makes $300 a month, um, you're not going to be replacing your income anytime soon with a strategy
Mhm.
like that. And let's say even you get 10 properties and they're all doing the absolute best that you could hope for, you're still only at $3,000 a month,
Yep.
and you're still probably not replacing your income with that, right? You're probably right at the poverty level at that level right there. So keeping that in mind, you may need significantly more houses unless you're doing alternate strategies like rent by the room or Airbnb, which even that has some inherent risks. So keeping that in mind, it's more intensive and it may not give you the exact amount of money that you're hoping and thinking that it will, but it is a great long-term play.
Yeah. And I know we've talked about this on several podcasts in the past that a lot of people think that the only way into real estate is by being a landlord, right? I know I talked about it, how I thought that too, and quickly discovered that was not my avenue whatsoever. Never want to be a landlord. So just to Andrea's point, it can be quite a lot of time. And then to her point, I mean, it's great because the property is yours, but then it's also not great if the property is all yours and things go bad, right? So a lot of things to balance out and to figure out what's best for you. So the next one probably needs a definition. So syndications. So first, can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so syndications are when money from various investors is pooled together to go in on a very big investment opportunity. And so this could be a very large multifamily or big RV park, big mobile home park, something like that. Um, be very careful about syndications because there's a lot of SEC regulatory things that you need to look out for. But let's say that all that's done correctly and lined up, they can be really awesome opportunities for you because there are potential ways to get tax benefits from them depending on the way that it's set up. So, not all of them have tax benefits, but there are potential opportunities for tax benefits, even if you're not a real estate professional. So, you would want to look into the specifics of the syndication and find out what those tax benefits are if they exist. And then it's also very passive. And so this is something where your money is pooled, you're a limited partner. So a limited partner is someone who really has no control over the outcome of the investment versus a general partner who is someone who does have control over the investment. So you'll be a limited partner, you're investing your money, and then you're getting your returns. It's almost like the stock market.
Mhm.
So they have a targeted return that they're thinking they're going to get, and then they're hoping to beat that return. But of course, that could also be negative. And most likely, you will need to be an accredited investor in order to participate in a syndication. So this is the first sort of thing that we have on this list that you would need to be an accredited investor. And so I'm refreshing myself on the definition of accredited investor. So I think you either need to have $1 million of net worth or $250,000 annually, something like that.
I
Is
believe so. Yeah, but you can easily Google it for the definition and the requirements.
Yeah. And so for syndications, you may need to be, or most likely need to be, an accredited investor. And so that may very well be a lot of the people that are on and listening to this podcast. You may be an accredited investor already. There's a way to just get yourself verified. If you're going to be participating in a syndication, they need accredited investor check. They'll just do like you can get a letter from your CPA, or there's like another program that you can submit your information to, and then they can
Mhm.
see that you're accredited to then move forward.
So if I am a W-2 worker and I meet the definition of being an accredited investor, let's say we have 1 million net worth or whatever the definition is, and I'm trying to decide between a syndication or private money lending, can you help me understand the differences? Because it sounds like each case I'm lending and it's very passive. And you said with syndication, I can do it with other people. But what are the other differences maybe between the two?
Yeah, private money lending is usually it's not always on a smaller investment, but a lot of times it's on a smaller investment. So a lot of the private money lending that you and I do is on single family homes that are being fixed and flipped. And so these are things that we're either providing the full amount for the fix and flip, or we're providing like maybe half. But in a syndication, you're probably talking about providing 1/100th or 1/20th or 1/10th of the money, right? Because it's such a big investment. And there's also like a general partner that's like running things, and you're a limited partner versus like you're just the one that's in first position as a private
Mhm.
lender, and then you're getting paid back in a certain amount of time. Syndications usually have a longer hold. So it'd be like something like 5 to 10 years that you could expect to get your return on your money back. Now, private money lending can be that way too, but I would say syndications are almost always longer, and private money lending can be shorter. It's not always shorter, right? But it can be shorter. So that's another difference as well.
Okay, perfect. And then let's go to the last one listed here. So we have RV parks slash Airbnbs for taxes. So I know we've touched on this a bit before, but if you want to go ahead and give us your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so we talked about earlier the real estate professional status, and that's really the only way to take advantage of the huge benefits of depreciation if you're investing, and you're looking for those like large chunks, right? Like you've heard of things like bonus depreciation, where you're able to write off a large chunk at once. You're getting this big paper loss. But if you're a W 2 investor, you can only do it against other passive income you have. So the odds of you having to and being able to use those significant chunks are really, really low. So if you're looking for tax benefits and you are a high income W 2 earner, one of the only couple of things that you can do are Airbnbs, which we've had a podcast on this, and would highly recommend that you check out John Davis's podcast to learn a little bit more about Airbnbs and some of the tax advantages that come with those. And then RV parks. And so one of the kind of reasons that you can do this both on Airbnbs and RV parks is you're looking for stays that are less 7 days or less. So, for example, if you're doing a midterm rental, that's normally 30 days or more. So that wouldn't qualify. If you're doing a long term rental, that's normally like a lease of a year, right? That wouldn't qualify. However, Airbnbs and RV parks, especially the RV parks that are near, national parks and very seasonal kind of opportunities, right, where people will come in for vacation and then they will leave, and they're not there for very long, right? They're kind of moving around. This isn't somewhere where people have an RV and they move into their RV in this spot and then they live there for the next couple of years, right? This is one of those more transitory RV parks. And so those in particular, because they have stays of 7 days or less, then the IRS actually treats that differently. Obviously, check with your CPA for specifics, but this is completely different. It's now non passive, and you're able to use that depreciation to offset your actual W 2 income. So, before, let's say there's that bonus depreciation on a $500,000 property, and you're able to write off, let's say, $120,000. I'm just using kind of some random numbers, but it's somewhere around there in depreciation. So, let's say you make 250,000, you're able to write off 120,000. So now it looks like you make 130,000, then you'll pay taxes based off of that 130,000. And so
Mhm.
that's where it's a really cool opportunity if you're looking for that. Now, a really key caveat where it says very hands on, this is very important. You have to demonstrate material participation. So this is 100 hours a year on this investment and more than anyone else. So that's the key factor, right? Because if you have a cleaner in your Airbnb and it's the same cleaner and she takes 5 hours to clean every time, and she only has 20 cleans that year, she's already at 100 hours, right? So now let's say she has 25 cleans, you have to make sure that you're beating her out, right? So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about this. It is a significant amount of time. A lot of times we find that people do these towards the end of the year, so they get the 100 hours in and they're able to kind of make sure that that's more than anybody else, right? And so towards the end of the year is a great time to think about doing RV parks and Airbnbs, because you can get those 100 hours in and you can beat out everybody else, and then the following year you can kind of do things business as usual, and if you don't end up beating everyone, it won't be as big of a deal. So best for tax benefits. RV parks are obviously a much bigger, it's like Airbnb, and then RV park is like Airbnb times 50, right? So there's a bunch of individual spaces and it's a pretty hands-on sort of setup, but just keep in mind that that is potential opportunity for some tax benefits in that scenario because of the length of stay.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, it's definitely one of the best strategies if you are willing to put in the time, right? So you have to make sure you really understand the material participation and link up with a CPA or someone that can really help you navigate that to make sure that you are doing it appropriately and within the right terms. So let's just talk about this money column in general, just like we did the time column. So basically, I think that this would be most applicable to full-time W-2 workers, just because we are committed to our full-time jobs, and it's going to be a lot harder to dedicate truly large amounts of times in real estate. And so if you do have money available that you are willing to either lend out or, private money partner, you could have your own property, which is still going to require a significant amount of time, right? These are great options, I think, to start out with. So as Andrea mentioned, we both do private money lending, and I think that this wasn't something that we initially fell upon. I think that if I would have had this illustration initially, it probably would have made a lot more sense that maybe this aligned more with my personality and as far as like my money and time options, meaning I have more money available than time right now. And so I think that from a security standpoint as well, it's definitely a great beginner option as long as you're working with people that are experienced and that you can trust. And then Andrea, what are your comments?
Yeah. So once again, even with this money situation, you want to stick with something for a significant period of time and really give it a fair chance. You can have deals go delayed, go poorly, even in this column. And so keep in mind that you'll go through the process, and then hopefully by the end of the process of completing a full deal, you'll have a good understanding of whether or not that is a good fit for you. So make sure you go through the whole process before deciding and then changing your mind again. We really want to try to stick with something for a little bit. Now, that being said, I think the natural real estate investor journey starts somewhere with something on the left hand side of like driving for dollars, bird dogging, working for someone, lead generation, property management, and maybe I'll add in the ownership piece. Like maybe add that one in, even though that's on the money column. And like most real estate investors get started in somewhere in that. So if they have more money, they'll start with the ownership piece. And then if they don't, they'll start with any of the things in the time column. And then they'll eventually move to some of these like bigger deals, right? So they'll move to like multifamily, syndications, RV parks, mobile home parks, other things that aren't even on this list. And then eventually they move into private money lending. And you kind of see this arc, like a lot of the old guys that are in your RIA or your real estate investment association, or that you'll talk to at meetups that have been around the block for 40 years, right? And they're in real estate, they're now doing private money lending. And so I always thought that was something you had to wait to do, just because they probably have been through this whole arc and now they have tens of millions of dollars, and that's why they're private money lending. And so I just want to say that we have that column about money, but it doesn't mean that you have to have millions of dollars, right? You really can get started with somewhere around 50,000 realistically. There's opportunities for less, but 50,000 is like a really good starting opportunity and starting place. And so, and once again, that money doesn't have to be in your checking account. It also could be available in a retirement account that you've moved to self-directed. So I just want to kind of put those caveats out there, that I know that we have these columns there, and there may be things that draw your attention right away. You can change around eventually, but try to stick with something as long as you can.
Yeah, I also wanted to add in, you always need to remember the market changes, right? So STRs or short-term rentals are becoming harder to generate revenue from unless you're a very top performer, which means you're gonna have to have like the best furniture, the best setup, the best pictures, like a true like experience, right? So you just can't have like your regular mom and pop STR listed anymore. Same thing with the cost of housing. Obviously, that continues to increase, so it's gonna be a lot harder to cash flow if you're renting out your property. Same thing if you add on a property management company, it's harder to cash flow with adding on all these other aspects. And so you always have to understand what the current environment and setting in real estate is, and then apply these factors as well as to what makes the most sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really appreciate those comments because it does change, and so that does make it easier and harder to do some of the things on this list as well. So just keep that in mind. Like you may start out, wanting to own properties, and you're buying in a really great time to buy, and then you decide you don't want to do it anymore. After 10 years, and you sell, and it's also a really good time to sell, and then you end up making a great amount of money. But you also could buy at a bad time to buy and want to sell at a bad time to sell. And therefore, you may not make any money at all. You may have to hold a little bit longer, or something like that. So, really important about those cycles. Pay attention and time. You can't really time things, but it's better to be in a position that you're able to hold things, even if you don't want to. So we don't ever want to be forced to sell any of these kind of things on the right hand side, right? Anything where we have ownership, we don't ever want to be forced to sell them.
Correct. And then one last thing from me is if anyone has any questions about where they think they fit best, I think Andrea and I were both more than happy to help you talk through it, just because we've navigated different avenues of where maybe we thought we'd be interested, and then we can tell you why it didn't work for us or why it didn't align with either our wants or personality or whatever that may look like. So more than happy to talk you guys through any of these.
Absolutely. I think it's so nice to talk this through. If you have this framework, then you can figure out how to get started, because I guarantee the very next thing you watch or listen to or talk to somebody about is going to be a completely different strategy than the one you were thinking about just 10 minutes prior. And the one after that is going to be different as well. And so this will really help figure out what is going to be the best for you.
Yes.
Perfect. So, with that, we really appreciate you guys listening to this week's episode of From Corporate to Cash Flow, and we will catch you next week. Hey, it's Andrea. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. If you liked it, I'd love it if you hit subscribe. Thanks so much.